The landscape of TV is changing, and it's facing a growing threat from the streaming providers. Take a look at this chart. Since the launch of Disney's streaming service last year, and with HBO Max and Comcast still to come this spring, we can see that, at least according to investors, not all streaming services are created equal. So what does this all mean for investors? Here to give us his take is Andriy Yastreb, Telecom and Media Analyst with TD Asset Management. Andriy, we've seen a divergence in reaction to the new streaming services. What's happening?
So if you take a look at this chart, what it shows is valuations and more specifically price to earnings ratios for Disney, Comcast, AT&T over the last 3 years. Historically, we wouldn't even compare these companies because these are different businesses, with different valuation drivers. But what's interesting here is that all 4 of these companies have launched or soon about to launch major streaming services. And the key is to focus on the changes in PE multiples because they reflect changes in investor expectations. And if you look at Disney, for example, its multiple doubled over the past year, and the fundamentals of the business haven't changed all that much, and the key change was launch of Disney Plus streaming service. If you look at Netflix, its PE multiple halved over the last 3 years, but the stock is more than doubled over the same time period, just because the company is growing so fast. And as to AT&T and Comcast, their multiples declined over years for different reasons, but they also launched or about to launch major streaming services, just like Disney did, and they're not getting any credit for that.
So why aren't AT&T and Comcast getting credit for moving into streaming?
So if you look at the market right now, basically the assumption is that Disney will be the winner in streaming. And the logic is that based on consumer surveys that we've seen, consumers are willing to have somewhere between 3 and 4 streaming subscriptions at a time. And Netflix and Amazon Prime Video already penetrate over half of US households, which leaves room for maybe 1 or 2 other companies to be winners. And Disney, with their large library, with really strong brands, with all the cartoons and Marvel and Star Wars, is expected to be one of the winners. So for AT&T and Comcast, there are 2 reasons. One, that analysts and investors don't expect at this point that they will necessarily be winners. They're not seen as must-have content compared to Netflix or Disney. And secondly, AT&T and Comcast are the 2 largest pay TV distributors in the US. And as streaming becomes larger and continues to grow, pay TV will continue to decline, meaning that their revenue and profits from that legacy business will decline. And the interesting part about that is that Disney actually also has exposure on that side. About half of their revenue comes from pay TV related services. But for now, at least, markets assume that Disney will be a winner in streaming. The value of that business will grow, and it will offset declines in traditional pay TV.
So what are some of the companies doing to try to boost their value?
So what we've seen from all the newcomers, Disney, Comcast, and AT&T, is that they're trying to grow as fast as they can. One way to do that is through partnerships, and we've seen Disney partnering with Verizon. Another way is that a lot of these services will be available for free to some consumers. For example, Disney Plus is available to 17 million Verizon consumers, and HBO Max will be available to millions and millions of AT&T customers.
And they're really trying to boost their subscriber growth, obviously.
Absolutely.
With some of these
it's all about scale. And Comcast is the most interesting one because they will launch their Peacock service this spring, and they will make it, the basic version of it will be available for free to anybody who wants it, with monetization done through advertising. And finally, all of them are trying to differentiate themselves. So using Comcast as an example, they will include news and sports, including Olympics this summer on this service, and it will be available for free to anyone who wants it.
This space is only going to become more crowded. What should investors look for?
Well, I think there are 3 major implications here. One is that for media companies themselves, as they move to streaming, there's a delicate balancing act that I mentioned before, that the value of streaming services will be growing, but pay TV existing businesses will be declining. And for investors, there is another level of complexity there, because we have to think about where the stocks are trading relative to expectations. In other words, are expectations too high, too low, or just right? Secondly, we will see cord cutting accelerating, and it accelerated last year, but I think that with as we discussed before, consumers have very limited time that they can dedicate to entertainment, to video entertainment, and as consumers watch more HBO and Max, Disney Plus,
yes,
and Peacock, the time has to come from somewhere, and most likely it will come from existing pay TV. And finally, I think the last point is that it's not winner-take-all market. I think there will be room for several large players in streaming, and that's very similar to what happened with existing pay TV ecosystem over time, where 4 or 5 different studios dominated the whole ecosystem.
So you could see 4 or 5 streaming services dominating the system as well.
Absolutely.
Andriy, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.